Welcome back to Flashpoint. The General Assembly has spent a lot of this week trying to get the state budget together. House Speaker Tim Moore says Republicans are close to numbers that they need to override Cooper's week-and-a-half-old budget veto. However, he wouldn't give exact numbers. Still, Democrats say they are confident their caucus is going to hold together. The reason for the governor's veto, he says the budget doesn't expand Medicaid coverage to thousands of low-income working adults, and he's unhappy with a business tax cut as well as a pay-as-you-go plan to fund school construction and renovation.
Overall, this budget is bad. It prioritizes the wrong things. It values corporate tax breaks over classrooms, gimmicks over guaranteed school construction, and political ideology over people.
The GOP majority plans to take up a stopgap measure. It would be a short bill geared largely towards keeping federal funding running through the state budget. Wes Harris, you've spent your past week up there in this. Give us a report.
Yeah, it was a fun and frustrating week. Just to respond to that, I do not think the Republicans have the numbers to overturn the veto. If they did, they would have done it. We had two members who were out this week on personal situations. That was a little tragic for both of them, and they still didn't pull the vote. They put on the calendar every single day, and the numbers just weren't there. We had a 6-hour session one day with 4 recesses. We were literally waiting for a Democrat to go to the bathroom so they could pull the vote, and so it's close.
Did you guys go
but
to the
they do not have the
bathroom?
number.
No,
we did not. We toughed it out. Yeah, we had to, and so it's. I agree completely with the governor. Like this budget, it's not a bipartisan budget. Again, 1 in 2 Democrats voting for a budget does not make it bipartisan. We do not have a seat at the table. They are not willing to negotiate in good faith. Again, talking together, listening, that is not negotiating. If I talk for an hour and then you just completely ignore everything, that's not a negotiation. And that's what this budget has. Again, it does not adequately fund the things that we need. And the capital expenditure plan is a travesty. It is one, aside from Medicaid, it is the most thing I'm upset about with this budget. And we are going to uphold this veto, and we're going to actually have a negotiation and get a good bipartisan budget for this state.
The governor was not involved, and you want to talk about good faith negotiations, the governor was not involved in negotiations. He hasn't put forth any real substantive priorities on his budget, and it's basically about his desire for Medicaid expansion to trigger the Obamacare provisions to do that. This is a great budget. Every single person, every single taxpayer in North Carolina will have more money in their pockets because the standard deductions increase, so it's a tax cut for everybody in North Carolina across the board. The franchise tax, he's talking about business taxes. That's a tax that is basically for the right and privilege of businesses to breathe the rarefied air of North Carolina. Now, I love North Carolina as much as anybody else does, but that is not the correct means for taxation, and it's not going to continue to grow this economy. We have less than 4% unemployment rate in North Carolina because of conservative policies, tax reforms, tax cuts, and those are the things here in this budget. We're getting you're getting the rainy day fund in this budget up to the $710 million again. And it's a good budget, and the governor needs to quit holding it hostage over Medicaid expansion.
Can I respond to that?
You got to respond.
Okay, absolutely. The governor has put forward a proposal. He put forward his budget in early March, before the entire budget process started, and we put forward a compromise budget on Tuesday. And the day after that compromise budget was put out, Phil Berger went to Germany for a week-long summit. And so, like, the Senate has left town, and they're not planning on coming back for a little while. And so there's not a good faith effort. And in terms of the task, we are at the end of the longest economic expansion in U.S. history, both nationally and in North Carolina. Yet,
do you give Republicans some credit for that?
I give Republicans some credit for that, and they have to give the Obama economy some credit for that, because it doesn't happen overnight. And at the same time, we are $8 billion short in school infrastructure, and we are at the bottom of the barrel in economic mobility. And I fear that we have wasted this last 10 years of economic expansion on tax cuts, which again, some I'm not all opposed to, because it is important to have a friendly business environment. But if we do not invest in our communities, if we do not invest in our people, those are the bedrocks that got us to this position. And if we don't do that, the next couple of years are not going to be nearly as good as what we've seen the last decade.
If I could just chime in on one point. When I heard him say this budget doesn't prioritize the right things, when I look at it from the outside in this perspective, I see 5% increases for employees. I see teacher pay increases. I see hurricane relief. I see rape kit backlog. All the things that I would say I would hope the majority of North Carolinians would think are priorities. And I understand the need to negotiate. I see it firsthand every day. But to go all in on Medicaid because it's a talking point, and when we know spending in this way only creates the problem more, it has to be attacked from a cost perspective if we're going to do anything, kind of makes me feel like this isn't going to be solved in a week or a summer. Let's do everything we need to do and have a long-term journey towards a solution.
In terms of Medicaid expansion and the cost of that, like it is paid for. They are federal dollars that we have put in.
Those things aren't going to be around forever, my friend.
Neither, and there's a lot of things on the federal government that may not be around for a long time.
That's done.
And we don't have to be. Like there can be language that if the federal government pulls back, we also pull back.
Nobody's going to ever believe
and
that's
again,
gonna happen.
you talk about raises. You look at the governor's budget. It spends the exact same amount this year as the Republican budget does, but it gives bigger raises. It gives 5% raises to all state employees. It gives up to 8% raises for teachers all across the board. The difference is the Republican budget slashes off about 5% of our general fund to pay in cash for infrastructure projects instead of issuing a bond that guarantees these projects, and that ties our hands. That ties our hands so we cannot continue to invest the way that we need to.
Last word.
Isn't it ironic that we're talking about Medicaid expansion and how the federal dollars will always be there when we're facing a $140 million shortfall because the federal government reduced Medicaid for children contributions? That's being covered in this budget. And we're hearing from the left that, Medicaid dollars from the federal government are always going to be there when we're facing a $140 million shortfall right now with the current Medicaid rolls.
Still, at the federal level, you don't hear a lot talk about deficits and budgets and things like that. I mean, I think Republicans who ran on that for decades, this past administration.
Not as much as we'd like. I mean, I would agree.
We're nearing $1 trillion deficit this year.
But a lot of good's happening, too.
Yep, more Flashpoint after this.